Kat Banyard, we've seen allegations that range from touching a knee to rape. Are they all part of the same line of behaviour?
Well, we know that violence against women exists on a continuum, from sexual harassment, as you say, to more serious and extreme violations. What underpins it all is an inequality of power between women and men, and various other cultural trends linked to that. So the toxic cultural current, which has existed for hundreds of years, that teaches boys and men that they are entitled to sexually access women's bodies regardless of whether the feeling is mutual. Now, all of these discussions about sexual harassment and sexism in Parliament, in wider society, this is not somehow incidental to politics. This is not an add-on. This is a very stuff of politics. This is about who holds power in society. And in this case, it's about men's power in a society which is still deeply sexist.
Dame Anne Leslie, I mean, you must have seen some appalling behaviour over the years.
Oh, my goodness, yes. I mean, this is pat a cake, that's going on now. It's ridiculous. I mean, when I was young, which is a very long time ago, every man in my office assumed that I was young and pretty, which is unbelievable, but I was, that I would welcome his stupid jokes and, touching me up and things. And of course I didn't. And after a while, I got so angry. I was a terrible smoker in those days that I actually stubbed out a fag on one of these people's arm. But the worst one was when I was very young. The first time I did any questions, which is live. And I'm there, sitting next to one of the panellists, who was a man called Sir Nicholas Fairbairn, who was Solicitor General in Scotland. And I suddenly realised that he had his hand up my crotch. And the question was something to do with, I don't know what it was. Now, I was so furious, but also scared, because, if I said what I would say to him, sort of 2 or 3 years later, if you do that again, I will tell Jonathan Dimbleby, who is that I can't answer any question until Sir Nicholas takes his hand out of my crotch. I didn't say it, but I always wished I had done. However, what I don't like about what's going on now is feminists have been trying all the time to say, oh, my goodness, women must be empowered. They must be strong. They will be strong. Women... And they seem to spend their time now saying that women are traumatised because some silly old drunk in Parliament put his hand on her knee or anything like that. You can't have it both ways. You can't say women are strong and empowered and then say, they're scared and they're going to cry and all that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I should say Nicholas Fairbairn is dead, so isn't here to defend himself from your allegation. But I mean, Kat Banyard, I mean, what do you make of what Anne Leslie is saying? I mean, do you feel that belittles in any way what's going on?
Well, I think it shows just how much courage that the women and girls reporting sexual harassment have when, on countless discussions on national TV and in the media, this issue is still trivialised and dismissed, when we know, actually, that sexual harassment is a routine, everyday experience for very many women and girls.
Joanna Williams, you have a different perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take issue, first of all, with the idea that these women are brave. I mean, to have lunch with someone in a very posh restaurant and discuss the state of politics is not in any way the equivalent of working down a coal mine or even working as a single mum as a cleaner. These are... And when these women come out and tell their stories about somebody may or may not have touched their knee 15 years ago, they receive a round of applause.
So you're not very sympathetic to them?
I'm not sympathetic. I actually think it's really offensive to women who have been raped that we discuss knee touching in the same breath as rape. I think that's hugely offensive.
Well, I mean, that's where I started this, isn't it? Is it all part of the same line of behaviour?
Well, we know that violence against women exists on a continuum and it's underpinned by the same sexist attitudes and inequalities of power in our society. And we have to address it all. It's not one or the other.
You see, I would take issue with that.
Yeah.
I really don't think that these things are on a continuum, and I think the suggestion that they are actually demeans women and belittles women. Women do know the difference between being raped.
Yes, I mean, you're agreeing.
Most of my career has actually been foreign corresponding. So I know the bad condition, the horrible condition of most of the women in the countries that I was working in. And if I said to them, you know, now in England, if any man does this to you, you should scream and say, rape coming up. I wouldn't insult them.
But they don't, do they? I mean, people don't scream and say rape. They say, stop treating me like a sexual object or an object or...
No, not in the places. Wars, for example, if you know, the number of wars I've done, and I'm sure you have too, women do not say, oh, stop it, he's trying to rape.
But why don't you aspire to live in a society where people just treat each other with respect?
Well, of course, but don't be so silly.
But you're excusing a lot of this behaviour, is what I'm saying.
No, I'm not excusing it at all, but I'm just saying, you know, proportion. We must have a sense of proportion.
I think it's really possible to criticise these things from, and I think Anne's example of stubbing out a cigarette on someone is wonderful, and I think it's possible to deal with these things
But not everybody's that brave, are they?
Well,
I mean, you don't have to be so brave to
You've got to be pretty brave to say that's a violent act. You could have been hit.
Next month, UK Feminista and the National Education Union are releasing a report which surveys students and teachers up and down the country about sexism in schools. And what it finds is that sexual harassment is rife in schools. And not only that, but young girls are learning that society just turns a blind eye and, in fact, brushes it off, as has happened in this conversation. Now, what that means is that it goes unaddressed and it just is allowed to perpetuate. We have to bring about change, and that means at every level. It means we have to continue the conversation, speaking out against sexual harassment, but we need to act on every level. Government, Ofsted, teacher training institutions and individual schools, so that we can make change for a new generation where girls are not subject to routine sexual harassment.
Nowadays is that sexual harassment is being defined so broadly. Yeah. There was a statistic released last week that showed that 28% of 18 to 24-year-olds think that winking is a form of sexual harassment. Now, to me, that's utterly tragic. What we're teaching young girls...
Can you see no circumstance under which winking could be sexual harassment?
No, absolutely not. You can ignore winking, or you can be flattered and you can actually enjoy being winked at. I do not see any circumstance under which winking is sexual harassment. It demeans and trivialises sexual harassment.
A leery teacher winking at a 15-year-old girl?
Winking is subjective. It's how you choose to interpret it. I think what's a problem is that we teach young girls to see themselves as victims, and that's tragic.
Apart from anything else about women, what is worrying me now is young men. Because young men in this country, white men, boys, they're not doing very well in schools. The women are beating them. They're not doing very well in jobs, ditto. And you're constantly telling young men that, you know, you are scum because you are so sexist and horrible and everything. And, you know, they are quite delicate creatures, men. And I think the net result is that they turn away into themselves and, you know, they will say, well, you don't want anything to do with me, do you? And they will use violence, because one of the things that really is difficult for young men is to read messages properly. And I think it's going to be very dangerous, because young men are the biggest problem we have now in schools and in everything else.
Do you know what? I think despite some of the minimisation, women and girls will continue to speak out against sexual harassment, and despite the naysayers, they will change the world.
I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you all very much indeed for coming in.